A very different feeling after this race. As we just finished up the second race of this triple header, we have sort of mixed feelings of what just happened.
When it comes to the Red Bull Ring, we are accustomed to seeing exciting racing, hard battles, and unpredictable outcomes. But that wasn't really the case this time around. We're going to be reviewing the Styrian Grand Prix this time, but luckily next week the Red Bull Ring has the opportunity to redeem itself.
And of course, at the same time, we're going to be answering our question of the video: did Charles Leclerc deserve his title of Driver of the Day? Be sure to let us know your thoughts right now down in the comment section. While you're down there, don't forget to leave this video a like and hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. So now with that aside, it's now time to get into the first half of this race, and usually I would say that there's a lot of points to cover, not particularly in this race, but we're going to make the most of it. Most of our action happened in these opening laps, but what in the first half got you excited? What good racing did you see? The floor is yours.
Let's just say I went through a lot of ups and downs, especially in probably the first 7 to 10 laps. You had some really hard battles going on right away. Obviously, Max got a clean getaway, and it just seemed like he was perpetually going to extend his lead. But you had Lando and Sergio fighting for that third place, and it was really cool to see a McLaren up there on pure pace before DRS was enabled. Some rather messy racing though from Charles Leclerc, who just seemed to kind of be a little bit all over the place. He made contact with Pierre Gasly on numerous occasions, which resulted in Charles having damage to his front wing and Pierre getting a puncture falling way down the grid. Eventually he gets spun and his race was pretty much ruined from there, which is such a shame because he had another amazing qualifying the day prior.
And after Gasly's puncture, he had to bring his car all the way back to the pit lane, where it was found out that he had suspension damage to his car, forcing them to retire it.
Although we did see some other drivers make some pretty impressive gains on those opening few corners. You had Lance moving up into 6th place. George, who started P10, was now in P8, looking super promising. And then Daniel Ricciardo made up 4 positions on the opening lap to jump in at P9. But then the race just kind of started to get strange. All of a sudden you see Daniel start dropping way back, basically losing all of the ground that he had made up. And we find out a couple of laps later that he suffered from a loss of power and lost all the progress he had just worked so hard to make.
When we look at the other driver for McLaren, Lando Norris, he wasn't really defending against Sergio and Valtteri when they were trying to pass him. He sort of just moved aside and let them by. It's almost as if they knew that they couldn't compete with the top 2 teams and just sort of wanted to secure their 5th place without damaging their car.
Meanwhile, Charles was tasked with having to make his way all the way back through the grid. It wasn't made overly difficult by him though. I mean, the back markers definitely didn't have as strong of pace as he had today. It also helped that there was a battle going on between George and Alonso that was kind of creating this train, really bunching everyone else together.
Just as we thought Russell was going to start making some moves on Alonso, next thing you know, his team radio in to tell him he has to back off to cool off the car, which later on turned into a pressure problem, ending up causing more issues for him later on in this race. Our next key moment in this first half before we get into the pit stops was Hamilton almost spinning out.
It looked really dicey for a second there, and he was able to continue, but that definitely was a close call.
And so now it gets to lap 27, we start seeing some cars coming in for their scheduled pit stops.
George comes in for his pit stop. You're hoping for a clean getaway, but it ends up being the polar opposite. It's frantic, everyone's running around, they're trying to fix this issue. It basically completely screws him up, and he re-emerges on track all the way down in 18th.
The next driver to follow suit is Sergio Perez, who comes in for his pit stop. The pit stop takes much longer than usual, and this opens up the door for Valtteri to get the jump on Perez. He ends up coming out in front of him in 3rd place, and now we're watching the fight between Perez and Valtteri going back at it for that 3rd place. And so this brings us to our halfway mark at lap 35. Cass, when you come to scoring the first half of the Styrian Grand Prix, what would it look like?
Overall, my scores were relatively average. I did have my excitement up at a 6 just because it seemed like there were some up and downs between the driver order, which also kind of brought into the racing. We did see some pretty good stuff, but we also saw some really rookie mistakes as well, so that's why I only put it at a 5. And then for drama, I also put it at a 6 just because of those pit stop woes, that first lap incident. So overall, this puts my first half score at like a 5.6. I'm gonna drop that down to a 5.5.
When looking at how I scored the first half, I only scored my excitement a 3. Besides that opening lap, everything else in the first half didn't really get me excited. When looking at the driving, I scored it a 4 just because of that opening lap. There was so many overtakes happening, but besides from that, I was kind of disappointed in the number of overtakes I was seeing on this track, considering it's the Red Bull Ring. However, most of my points in the first half go towards the drama, which I scored a 7. Considering you had the incidents on the first lap, also including Daniel's problems with his engine and losing some pace, Hamilton almost spinning, and who could forget what was happening in the pit stops. Scoring my first half around a 4.6, I'm gonna bring that down to a 4.5. And now when getting into our second half, Cass, how did things progress for you?
I can say that it definitely started off on a low point for me personally, because pretty much as soon as we got to the halfway mark, George came into pit, and that was the end of his race. They had to retire the car due to a power unit issue, and it was all over from there. Charles seemed to be moving a long trend with the first half of this race, gradually making his way up through the field, but still getting himself involved in some minor incidents. This time around it was with Kimi Räikkönen. He just took a little chunk of Kimi's front wing.
No investigations done by the FIA for this. Questionable, but it really seemed like the Ferrari had the pace in the race this weekend because he also had Carlos, who was making substantial gains, moving his way up into P6 by the end of this race. Next, by lap 55, we have Sergio coming in to pull off a 2-stopper similar to France to try and catch up on some medium compound tires to Valtteri to take 3rd place.
Over the radio, we heard Sergio asking when he would be within striking distance to Valtteri, and we were told it would happen on the last few laps of the race. So there was some building anticipation towards this moment. And then next thing you know, we are approaching those final last laps. Still not much happening.
You had Valtteri getting caught up in some traffic, not being close enough to the back markers for them to get a blue flag to let him by. So you thought this would bring Sergio much more into the play a lot more sooner, but it didn't come down until the last lap where he finally got a chance, or came close to a chance. Wasn't enough, as we all know. Just one more lap was probably needed for him to get the move done.
I was really hoping to see some sort of last corner overtake, a scenario 7 type of thing going on with Sergio, but just wasn't the case this time around. But we'll see what happens next week.
So Max ended up taking the win, Lewis fastest lap in 2nd place, and Valtteri finishing off our top 3. It's the 17th time we get these 3 on the podium. But when it comes time to scoring the second half, Cass, what'd you think?
I think it comes as no real surprise to anyone that my scores were significantly lower in the second half. I put my excitement down at a 2. I was just so disappointed to see that there was absolutely no chance at a Williams redemption. For racing, I put it at a 3 just because the only stuff we were really seeing was from Charles once again, added with a couple of overtakes from Carlos, but I don't know, it wasn't all that substantial for me. Definitely not in the second half. And then for drama, also put it down at a 2. There just wasn't much going on aside from George retiring. That puts my overall score for the second half at a 2.3, and I'm gonna bump that down to a 2.25.
I feel like I was a bit more generous than you for the second half. I did score my excitement at a 4, mostly merited that they did get my interest with Perez going on the hunt on Valtteri and getting that close within the last lap. In terms of the racing though, I did score it higher than the first half. In the first half, you only saw it mostly in the opening lap, whereas here you saw more frequent overtakes happening throughout the race. Some wheel-to-wheel battles as well, most of them though coming from Charles Leclerc. In terms of the drama though, I did score it only a 3, and pretty much that was just caused by the things that were getting me excited, which was that fight for the final 3rd place on the podium. So when combining all of these 3 scores together, my second half comes out to a 4. So when combining both of our scores together, the Styrian Grand Prix comes out to a final score of a 4, thus making it so far the worst race of the 2021 calendar season. Here's how it compares to all the other races so far and what's to come. So now it comes time to answer our question of the video. Does Charles Leclerc deserve the driver of the day? For my opinion, I can see the reasons why, as he was the one to make up the most grounds on the racetrack. On the contrary though, the runner-up for driver of the day was Max, and if let's say we had him start from lower on the grid. I think we would have saw much more overtaking. That would have been really intense if his race was going through other drivers on the track versus just increasing his lead.
I am also of the opinion that I don't think Charles deserved driver of the day. I'm sorry, but if you knock out one of your competitors from the race through kind of risky driving, I don't think you deserve to have that title awarded to you by the end of it, especially because he also got himself involved with a minor incident with Kimi as well. At the end of the day, he still finished the race exactly where he qualified. Yes, it was impressive to see him make his way through the field, but guess what? So did Carlos. Carlos started 12th on the grid and made his way up to 6th. I think that's more impressive considering he did his entire race in a clean, well-driven fashion.
We of course passed the question on to you. Let us know your thoughts down in the comments. While you're down there, don't forget to leave a like on this video, hit that subscribe button. We'll be back here with the Austrian Grand Prix. You'll have to tune in next week to find out what we score.
As per usual, make sure to follow us on social media at CCF1 to keep the conversation going.
And we will catch you in the next video.